Focus magazine is synonymous with commercial vehicle testing in South Africa. In fact, no one else does what we do. We independently evaluate commercial vehicles. And for years and years, we've been bringing trucks together from all the OEMs. We test them, and then they anxiously await the results because they want to see how they've performed versus their competitors. But today, we're doing something completely different. It's Iveco versus Iveco.
Well, we've done truck tests similar to this before. So every couple of years we run vehicles from, say, Johannesburg down to Durban to measure fuel consumption, average speed, obviously trip time, which is important to the operator at the end of the day. Right now we're the only ones doing these tests. So Truck Science together with Focus magazine run these tests every couple of years to give the industry some benchmarks on fuel consumption, productivity and general performance of the vehicles.
Fuel is the transport operator's greatest expense, and with the latest round of fuel price increases, even more so. So that's obviously something we're going to be watching very closely during this test. We've refueled both vehicles with 100 litres of fuel, which is the maximum capacity, and now we'll keep an eye on their fuel consumption. We're expecting anything from about 13 to maybe 17 litres per 100 kilometres.
Transport operator will use these results in their decision when purchasing vehicles. So they'll want to be able to predict the fuel consumption or know more or less what the fuel consumption will be so that they can use those figures in their cost predictions. So before going into an operation, you need to quote for a contract and you need to make sure that you have the fuel consumption fairly accurately pegged.
But if these vehicles have been launched internationally, surely overseas data pertaining to aspects such as fuel consumption is readily available.
Conditions overseas are obviously slightly different to here in South Africa. The route topography will be not as hilly as what we have here in South Africa, and also the weights that we carry here in South Africa are typically slightly higher, especially on the bigger vehicles. On these vehicles, these dailies, the weight is limited by the gross vehicle mass and not necessarily by the regulations. But the fuel consumption in South Africa will typically be slightly higher than the fuel consumption measured in Europe. The route from Joburg to Durban is one of the toughest in South Africa. It's also the most commonly used route for freight, I would say. The topography takes us from an altitude of about 1,600 meters down to sea level. So it is really hilly, especially when we get down to KZN. And that is punishing for the vehicles and creates a worst case scenario in terms of fuel consumption and average speed. These vehicles are typically used in courier applications where time is of the essence. And on the route from Johannesburg down to Durban, these vehicles can be competing against the airlines. So cargo freight, they need to get down there as quickly as possible, that they get there almost before the aeroplanes get there. And that's why speed or average speed is critical in this application. So these vehicles can travel at a maximum speed of 100 kilometers per hour, but they'll aim to achieve an average speed of over 80 kilometers per hour. So to get down to Durban in about 7 hours or so.
After several hours on the road, we arrived in Harrismith, which gave the driver pairing of father and son, Hein and Dieter Engelbrecht, the chance to compare notes.
What's your consumption now?
I'm sitting at about 7.3 kilometers per litre, but we'll see how it goes further along.
Well, we're getting close to 10. That just shows you the experience.
Yeah, nice.
Halfway into day one, the vehicle certainly didn't need refueling, but we did. We continue our journey after the break.
After Harrismith, the topography changes as you pass over the escarpment, making the busy N3 even more challenging.
So we had a good run down today. We probably spent about an hour longer on the road than we planned initially, because we experienced some rain along the route and a lot of traffic, roadworks, and some real delays that would make the drivers quite annoyed at times, because at some point we had sort of stop-start traffic. But we got here in the end, safe and sound. Fuel consumption for today is looking very good. Yes, we've come downhill mostly, and we've probably had a slight tailwind, and the fuel consumption that we're expecting so far on the smaller vehicle, that's the 50C15, I'm expecting that to come out at about 11 litres per 100 so far, and the bigger vehicle, the 70C15, so far is running at about 13 litres per 100. Tomorrow we'll probably get slightly higher consumptions because we're running uphill towards Joburg, and we are expecting a bit of a headwind, but we'll see how the fuel consumption averages out when we get to the other end. If we compare the fuel consumption of the smaller vehicle, the 50C15, this vehicle weighs in at about 5,400 kilograms, and if you compare that to a sort of standard SUV which weighs between 2 and 2.5 tons, so this vehicle comes in at about more than double the weight. And if we look at that, the fuel consumption of about 11 litres per 100, that's about the same as you'd get out of a diesel SUV these days. Yes, there's small differences in the top speeds and average speeds. If you're driving a typical SUV, you'll probably drive 120 on the highway. This vehicle is driving at about 100, but nevertheless, to achieve the same fuel consumption at double the weight and a slightly lower average speed, I think that's a phenomenal result.
One of many reasons why transport operators should consider a daily is because it's very cost effective. I particularly like the idea that it comes with a 5-year, 120,000 kilometer service plan, which means you don't have to worry if you're bringing it to a dealership like this. Then there's also this bumper. It consists of 3 parts. This is not a new idea within the industry, but it certainly is a good one, because if you have a minor bumper bashing or anything like that, you only need to repair the part of the bumper that's actually been damaged and not the whole thing. The first of the vehicles that we're testing is this panel van, which has a GVM, a gross vehicle mass of 5.4 tons. The other one is a chassis cab with a GVM of 7.2 tons. Just in case anyone isn't familiar with the term chassis cab, basically this vehicle comes out of the factory with the chassis and the cab, and that is it. Then the transport operator can take it to a bodybuilder and add whatever body he or she would like to utilize.
Although these are functional vehicles, the interior is not lacking when it comes to safety and modern amenities. There are airbags for driver and passenger, USB ports, an infotainment system, aircon, electric windows, and an added bonus is the multifunctional steering wheel. To make the test more real-world, both vehicles were loaded to within 200 kilograms of their maximum carrying capacity. It is ever so easy to load the van, since you have access both side and rear.
These 2 Iveco dailies are relatively new to the South African marketplace, but that doesn't mean to say that they're not tried and tested. Before the international launch, they were subjected to 3.5 million kilometers of testing. So our little test should be a doddle for them.
With the return journey more of a challenge thanks to the constant uphills, there was no shortage of technical jabbering from both driver and observer.
Just under 2,000 revs, it feels like a sweet spot.
And what's your speed?
The speed now is 75.
Okay, that's pretty good.
Yeah. 1,100 revs. As long as we don't drop below 1.7, then she's perfect. She's purring like a cat.
Okay, so when it drops to 170, you change to lower gear.
Then I get down.
And how hard do you push up the revs before you change it to a higher gear?
I try not to go under 1.7. I try not to go over 2.5. So between 1.7 and 2.5.
So that's your sweet spot.
That's my sweet spot, right? Yeah. But we can see the fuel consumption. Burring Hill is it's not just for the comrades runners.
The N3, as most people know, is a vitally important supply route. Tens of thousands of trucks and vans use this highway every year, and an average of 58 million tons of freight is carried along this corridor per annum. But we digress. There was also lots of jabbering in the other vehicle too.
I'm thoroughly impressed, spending over 900 kilometers driving this vehicle. The way the engine is just so comfortable. I mean, we've loaded with 3.5 tons inside it and we can easily overtake. I've got smooth power delivery. I really don't have to struggle in my gears. I was worried at a stage going on those uphills coming from Durban towards Harry Smith, and it was so comfortable. We didn't struggle at all. There was more than enough power. It's a vehicle that's extremely comfortable to drive.
With the most challenging part of the climb to the escarpment a thing of the past, the Free State provided fairly level roads for the last part of the journey. The only stop was at the Sanral Weighbridge to double-check the weights of our vehicles.
You can park your front wheels on that first section. You see that first section? Yes.
Exiting the N3 at Suikerbosrand, we headed back to the R59 and the engine blockhouse just south of Johannesburg to top up the tanks for the very last time. This marked the end of a 1,084 kilometer journey, which took a total of 16.5 hours, including stops.
Statistics, specifications, safety features, fuel consumption, that's all very well, but I think we need to get it from the horse's mouth and ask the drivers what they think about the new daily.
I'm really impressed with the way the vehicle handled. The steering wheel is quite light and easy to maneuver. I don't know what Hein experienced on his one.
Well, it's the overall layout of the vehicle. It feels like a double cab bakkie. You're comfortable, you've got everything you need. The air conditioner helps a lot. I know you didn't have an aircon, but you know, your age sometimes helps. You've got some advantages. They talk about the noise, vehicle harshness. This thing is so quiet inside, you know. We never had to ask a question again with Martin sitting next to me, and it was just an overall pleasant experience. Real smooth ride. The gearing is absolutely fantastic on the vehicle.
We had a couple of times where you had to brake kind of emergency because it is the N3. There are guys pulling out in front of you trying to take those gaps. I'm really enjoying the brakes. The transmission is smooth gear changing for me. I could really move into any gear I wanted to at any stage and move out of the gear without needing to worry about a double clutch, anything like that. It ran like a dream, felt like a car.
Well, my advice to any potential buyer is look at the fuel consumption firstly, the layout inside the vehicle, the comfort of the vehicle for the driver. You know, it's governed at 100 kilometers per hour. You've got that feature, you've got cruise control. I don't think there's anything else you could add to the vehicle. It's perfectly positioned in the market to get your goods on time safely to your customer.
Okay, so that's it. 2 days of testing done and dusted. The dailies have not put a foot, or should that be tire, wrong? But now the million-dollar question is this: what sort of fuel consumption have they recorded?
So before the test, we ran some simulations, and I've had a quick look at the actual results just from the Bowser readings and the sort of average speeds that we've run. And the results are probably within sort of 5%, 5 to 10% of the simulated results. And we expect the drivers in a controlled test like this to perform slightly better than the simulation. So we set a slightly conservative benchmark in terms of the simulations to ensure that an average driver can achieve those results in an operation.